Let's take you to news from our neighbors now. And the African National Congress has met with Zimbabwe's governing Zanu-PF to discuss the political and economic crisis in that country. But the delegation did not meet with any of the opposition or other stakeholders. ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule says they will return to Zimbabwe to meet with him, or they will be invited to South Africa. The party says the meeting with Zanu-PF was met with open discussions and mutual respect. We're joined by journalist Zenzele Ndebele, who's out in Bulawayo for us. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. So did this meeting register at all, or was it a non-event, a private meeting between two old friends?
I mean, depending on which side you are on, I mean, for Zanu-PF, it was a very successful meeting where they cordially discussed issues with their fellow liberation movement. And for ordinary Zimbabweans, it was a non-event because they thought that ANC was here to solve the Zimbabwean crisis, but it looks like they were here to mend the relationships with Zanu-PF. So nothing much that came out of that meeting except, Ace, I mean, coming and now speaking like a Zanu-PF member, and also not meeting most of the stakeholders that people expected that they were going to meet, and actually postponing meeting other political parties and civil society.
You speak of solving the crisis in Zimbabwe, but the Zanu-PF will tell you confidently there is no crisis in that country.
And actually, what is interesting with the communique that was released after the meeting, the Zanu-PF Secretary for Administration, Opetnpov, said within that meeting they avoided using the word crisis because there is no crisis in Zimbabwe. And actually they said they have challenges both for Zanu-PF and for ANC. So for Zanu, this was quite a success, because they managed to convince ANC, at least according to what is in the public domain, that there is no crisis in Zimbabwe. It's just misinformation peddled by the people who were in the Mugabe government, which they now call fugitives in foreign lands. And for them, there is no crisis. And actually, we saw Ace Magashule saying that they should guard against the misleading social media reports and actually avoid the media or social media setting the agenda for the two liberation movements.
These are two parties that have contributed significantly towards change in their countries. Some would argue that, South Africa is very much also in crisis and following in the footsteps of Zimbabwe. So it's one party looking in the mirror at another party in terms of how badly things can go. Some credence to that thought?
It's actually true because, ANC is a liberation movement, and they know that at one point they might be facing the crisis that the Zanu-PF has. If you are talking about economic empowerment in South Africa, you know that you have a problem. And if you look at that communique, they're actually talking about natural resources that should be used to empower Zimbabweans. So South Africa is sitting on a time bomb with the land issue, the economic empowerment, making sure that minerals benefit the ordinary South Africans. And this is the issue that is a problem in Zimbabwe. The land reform program in Zimbabwe, the land invasions led to where Zimbabwe is because it then lost confidence with the rest of the world. So South Africa, or ANC, could be seeing itself in the mirror when they're looking at Zanu-PF, and they would rather side with the liberation movement like them, because I'm sure Zanu-PF behind closed doors gave them convincing arguments about their situation in Zimbabwe. And you saw ANC calling for the lifting of sanctions and talking about those people who brought the liberation movement or the independence can therefore not be accused of violating human rights. So I think whatever Zanu-PF did, they pulled the masterstroke, and I'm sure they are quite happy where they are. They managed to convince ANC that there is no crisis in Zimbabwe.
Shared glory between the two parties, but there's also shared problems. There was a nurses' strike in Zimbabwe which started way back in June. We understand that has come to an end. What more do we know about that?
Well, what we know is that the now Minister of Health, who's also the Vice President of Zimbabwe, Constantine Chiwenga, the former general, he is trying by all means to give this picture that is turning the health sector around and there is progress. So one of the things that he wants to do desperately is to make sure that the nurses that have gone on strike are going back to work. And we've seen those reports that nurses are going back to work. But time will tell whether the nurses are going to go to work, because we have not heard that the working conditions that we're complaining about have changed that much, and we are not really clear what packages they've been offered. But it's only a matter of days to actually look at how many nurses have gone to work. They are complaining about lack of, protective clothing, medicine, and all these problems that are in the public hospitals. And we have not heard much on what is going to be done to make sure that they address those issues that made nurses to go into strike in the first place.
The country, on another note, ready to resuscitate the tourism industry, indicating that it might open flights locally but also internationally.
Zimbabwe, needs tourism. We need the foreigners, and also, in fact, even the locals to start moving for many other reasons. So it is a welcome move for many people who want to travel. But I guess the question is, how are they going to make sure that the cases of coronavirus that are going down, they don't start to surge? You don't see a second phase or a second return of the virus. With the numbers of travelers coming in, we might actually see a second wave of the virus. So we can only hope that it is going to improve the economy, which is already struggling. So people really need the tourists to come. The hospitality industry is one of the industries that were hard hit by coronavirus, and the opening of the airspace is a good move and is good news to many people in Zimbabwe.
Zenzele Ndebele out in Bulawayo in Zimbabwe for us. Thank you very much for